That's the end goal with something like this, is to, as you keep working, everything you've ever done will become available to you and usable to you because you have a reference for all the levels and how all the tracks should work together. Stephen Miller recording, back with another video. Very excited about this one. So today I wanted to look at, from the songwriter's perspective, how to be able to make a demo quickly and efficiently and also sound really good at the same time. There are a lot of ways that you can work within your software to help you get good results without spending a whole bunch of time fiddling around with settings. The mentality for this is going to be make a decision and move on. And if we have a mindset going into this, it's going to help us work a little more effectively. Any little inconvenience can totally derail your creative train, and you want to keep that train rolling as fast as possible. So the goal of this video is to just make our workflow more productive. This isn't meant to be like a step-by-step guide on how to make a template. I'm just going to show you how I would make a template from scratch, and if there's anything along the way that you might find useful or might want to implement in your own workflow, then that's great. That's what the video is for. But don't take this as a gospel of like, this is the only way to make a template, or these are the only things that should be in your template. I'm really just scratching the surface, but this will be the first in a lot of different videos where I'm going to talk about workflow hacks and how to get quicker with things. So this is just going to be my first overview of all the different things that you can think about, and I kind of go off topic and get more specific into other things, as you'll see. But again, this is just to be general information on the subject of templates and increasing your workflow in your software. We're just going to dive right in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from a blank template or a blank session. We'll just build up a demo as we go. I'll play a couple riffs and get it in here just to kind of simulate the kind of workflow that I would do in real time. And as I go along, I'll explain little things of why I'm doing something a certain way or why I have a certain thing set up like this. And the goal here is to learn how we can shave that valuable time off of the technical process so we can spend more time on the creative process. So the first thing that I would start with would be drums. I would put in some sort of a loop. We're just trying to get something very quick that we can play along to that's going to capture the vibe of our idea. So for this, I like to use the drummer feature in Logic. So if you look down here, you have this little matrix, and there's a whole bunch of different styles, and there's a bunch of different drummers too. And what you can do is down in this matrix, you can either make the drum beat simpler or more complex or louder or softer. So I want something kind of simple. I'm going to crank the loudness up, and we're just going to see what Kyle plays for us. Okay, and it doesn't sound too bad, like the actual tone's like okay. We're just trying to get ideas out as quickly as we can. So I'm going to go ahead and take the time and pick a drum beat that I like. Okay, I can use that for the riff I have in my head. Now, in addition to the drummer feature in Logic, you can also get sample libraries of other drum kits. So over here I also have Superior Drummer pulled up just to show you that, just to show you what else is out there, right? And so this is going to be, it's going to be more high quality sound, and it's going to have a lot more options as far as what you can do with the sounds. So if you're one of those people that likes to get super meticulous, or if you're a drummer and you want to have full control over all of the individual microphones, you want to be able to pick a whole bunch of different kick drums. There's a whole bunch of other drum sets you can get for this. You can select if you want to play with sticks or with brushes. So this is like a more comprehensive drum machine for acoustic drums than, like, say, the stock drum machine that might come with your DAW. So just to give you an idea, if you were to use Superior Drummer, this is what it would sound like. So we're just going to move this down here. We're going to just listen to Superior Drummer. So that's what's available to you. Now with Superior Drummer, there are MIDI libraries that you can get, and you can go through the MIDI grooves that you can just drag into the timeline, and those are really handy for songwriting as well. But since that it's not available to me right now, I'm going to continue using the Logic Drummer track. So as I'm going through the song, I can go back and very quickly make changes to the drum part. And so maybe after I've spent time with the drum part from a songwriting perspective, once I know I have it all set the way I want it to, maybe then I could take that MIDI and put it on something like Superior Drummer. So then I have more control over the sound, and I don't need to worry so much about, is this part going to fit? That aspect's already finished, so now we can move on to making it sound good. But for now, I'm going to stay with the Logic Drummer, so we can keep editing our performances if we need to. Okay, so for now we're just going to get rid of this. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is start bringing in some guitars. So what we're going to do is we're going to make 2 audio tracks. And the reason why I'm making 2 is because this one is going to be our guitar 1. This is going to be our actual guitar amp sound. And then this is going to be our direct track. Alright, so a DI, or a direct input, is it's just the signal straight off the instrument into the computer. And the reason why we would want that, in addition to the tone that we want to use, is let's say that you're working on this demo and you get performances that are really good. You can just take those direct inputs, or DI tracks, or whatever you want to call them. I'm just going to call them DI from now on. So at that point, you can take those DI tracks and you can move them to another session. You can send them out to get reamped. But either way, those performances exist now just directly off the guitar, and you can manipulate the sound in a lot of different ways. And I'll show you a couple reasons why you would find that handy. So I use a Axe-Fx 2, and so I already have inputs. The inputs on these 2 tracks routed to come from my Axe-Fx. So I already have this set up for the amp, and this for the DI. Alright, so I'm here, I got my guitar, I'm ready to play my riff, but before I do that, let's talk about the signals going into the software. I'm using an Axe-Fx 2, and I have output 1 left of my Axe-Fx going into this Guitar 1 track that we've made, and then I have output 1 right going into this Guitar 1 DI track that we made. And then on my interface, I have them selected. We're going through the digital output, the SPDIF output. So any changes I need to make to my signals or my volume are going to be inside the Axe-Fx. So this is the tone that I'm using. I can talk about how I make Axe-Fx tones in another video, but what I've done in my Axe-Fx is that one of these blocks just has a straight patch from the input all the way to the output, and that's how I get my DI signal. And then I put it on its own channel, so I'm just I'm turning the balance all the way to 100%, so it's only coming out of the right side, and then I have my volume here adjusted. So if you look on the DI track, if you look at the metering, when I palm mute like an E power chord on the bottom strings, that's usually, that bloom of the low end is usually what's going to clip your interface the most, that part of the guitar. So I always use that to gauge where my peaks are going to be. And so as long as it's not clipping, it's fine. As long as it's not too low, it's fine. But what I want to stress in this part pretty heavily is that when you're making these templates, the thing that we're going to pay attention to the most is where these levels hit, and we're going to note where they hit. So every single time we pull up these templates, we want our tracks to hit the meter the exact same way, or they won't sound right when you play into your template. So for instance, if I I seem to be peaking around -6. So once we go through the whole video, we're going to have a template of what we did so we can easily recreate all the tones and sounds we've got. But if I play a DI track into the computer now at a different volume with the finished template, it won't sound the same. And we're going to have to regain stage everything. If you want to make use of this template trick that we're coming up with today, I would recommend having like a dedicated channel on your interface specifically for your guitar DI, and then never touching it, and only adjusting it when you plug in a new instrument or what have you, but have some sort of documentation of where those levels need to hit, so that way you can have consistency in your sound, okay? I'm hitting at -6, that doesn't mean you have to. You're going to have some give and take with everyone's different interfaces. Some are going to be more dynamic than others, some are going to clip a little sooner than others, so you're just going to have to make it work for you. But to take advantage of the template, it needs to hit the exact same way every time. And the next thing I'm going to do is, before I start recording, I'm going to group these tracks together. Okay, so I have them highlighted, and then over here on the far left hand side. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do with these two tracks is I'm going to group them together using the groups feature. So down here in the mix window, this block above where the automation modes are, it's called group. So you want to have both of the tracks highlighted that you want to group together. You can click on the group. We're going to go group 1, new. Alright, we're going to call this guitar 1. And you can call it anything you want. You can call it guitar 1, guitar left, whatever it is. We're going to call this guitar 1. We're going to click down on the settings. And the settings that are really important here is the editing selection. And you want to check quantize locked audio. Okay. The next thing you want is you want to deselect all of these because you want to make sure that you can mute and change the volume of your faders independently. But the thing that we care about is record. Let's say if these were not grouped, turn this check off, so now they are no longer in a group. So let's say we were recording, and in Logic, if you press the R key on whichever track that is highlighted, it will start recording on that track. Click this, click R, and they get through their take, and then they realize, oh, my DI track was not recording. So you can just record on both of them, or if you had them grouped, there's no question about it. It will always record on the other one automatically when this track is being recorded too. So now if I were to hit record on this, just like I did before, now that they're grouped, I don't have to change the way I think about using my DAW. I've gotten my DAW to follow me and do what I want it to do. So now I have both tracks being recorded. I have an amp track and a DI track now. Another thing that gets really tedious, so we know for this riff we're going to want more than just one guitar. So we're going to have guitar 2, and we're going to have a DI for guitar 2. And these can either be separate guitar parts or a left and right. You want to label your tracks for what their purpose is, so as you're going through your session, there's no question what it is. So these aren't separate guitar parts, these are going to be just a left and right double. So we're going to rename these just to help us out. Okay? And so now, if you look at here, guitar right and guitar right DI are part of the same group. Now that's not going to work because you now have multiple inputs within the group that share a similar routing input. So for instance, this guitar left and guitar right are coming on the same input. They can't be record on together. And Logic will even remind you of this. So we have to make these independent. So we're going to move off guitar 1 and we're going to move to group 2, and we're going to call this guitar right, and then we're going to change this input to guitar left. Okay? And so if you notice, when you click on guitar right now, all of our group settings are no longer the same because this is the Logic default group settings. This little cog, if you click, you can say copy settings. So we're just going to click on guitar left, make sure that's highlighted. We're going to copy settings. We're going to move down to guitar right. We're going to paste settings. So now, each guitar track will arm its own DI track. So now that I have my tracks grouped, I'm ready to start recording my riff. Now in Logic, you also have this cycle feature. If you have the cycle turned on while you record, you can just keep recording over and over again in a loop, and all of your tracks will get put into a take folder. So I'll show you how that works too. Alright, so I just recorded my riff into the guitar left track, and I have my DI track. And if I go over here, and this shows all the takes I did. So by letting this cycle through, I was able to just play the riff over and over. Now I can go through and pick the best ones. The best one was 5, so that's the one I'm going to keep. But also, if you have Logic, you can do stuff like this where, see this little tool where it looks like 2 bars, my mouse just turned into 2 bars. I can actually go and say like, okay, let's say I wanted the first 4 bars of take 3. You just click and drag this over. And look, so now here at measure 4, you can have the first 3 bars of take 3 and then the last remaining bars of take 5. And because you had everything grouped when you first started, if you click on the DI drop down, you can see that it has followed take 3 for the first 3 bars and take 5 for the rest. And that was because when we first started, we grouped and we clicked on editing and quantize locked audio. So if this wasn't checked, it wouldn't do that. Alright, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to record a double. So we have a wider stereo image, and we're just going to double the left and the right guitar exactly. Now, just a quick thing that I'll bring up, when I'm recording doubles for my guitar takes, once I get a take that's really good that I want to use on the left side, I will not tune and record with the exact same state my guitar is in from the last take of the guitar left for the guitar right. The reason being is that as the guitar drifts slightly out of tune from when you originally tuned it, throwing it back in tune, you're no longer going to be in tune with the last take, right? So when you have 2 guitars that are where you have all the strings micro-tuned a little bit away from each other, you get sort of a chorused sort of sound. So I'll actually demonstrate that to you. I'm going to try and get one take that's good before tuning and after tuning, and you can see how the tracks will behave with each other, okay? Alright, so I have a take. I haven't tuned the guitar yet. I'm about to tune the guitar now. I'm going to record another take, and I'm going to let you hear the difference. Okay, so I just tuned the guitar. I didn't have to tune it much. For instance, the D string was already perfectly in tune, but as I went down the strings, they were just a little sharp, so you're going to hear in probably the A and the D string a little bit of warble because they're just ever so slightly flattened this time around. So that's going to be my prediction, and we're going to listen to it and see what happens. Alright, so take 1 of the right guitar is going to be before I tuned, and take 2 is after I tuned. So I'm going to split this here. So at measure 5, it will switch. Let's take a listen. So it's very subtle, but what I'm hearing is when it switches at measure 5, the stereo image becomes unbalanced, and it kind of sounds like my head is getting pulled to one side slightly. Now, a lot of people have probably heard that before in their own recordings, just from habit of tuning between every take. But if you listen pretty carefully, you'll hear the right side guitar will appear louder on take 1, just a little bit, because you have more of a sameness between the 2 tracks. Now the differences between the two tracks is what gives you that stereo image. And so the stereo image does get amplified slightly on take 2, but as far as tuning goes and the clarity of the instrument, the guitar as a voice will speak more in the track when it's more in tune that way. So if you find that your guitar parts get lost in your mixes or demos, that could be a factor in play. So I've just found that I've had clearer guitar parts in denser mixes when I adhere to this sort of mode of thinking about tuning. Alright, so we're going to talk about bass now. We're going to do the same thing we did before with these guitar tracks. For this bass track, we're going to go ahead and make a new group for them. And we're going to paste our settings so now they record together. Alright, so we're going to talk about bass now. So just like how we have the guitars, I have a bass and a bass DI track. I'm going to go ahead and route them to their proper inputs. Okay, and in the group settings, we have pasted our settings from the other guitars into here, so now they will edit together and record together. And what I use for my bass recordings is I have a rack mount SansAmp RBI, and so what I'm doing is in the back of that there's a DI out, and so that's how I'm getting my DI signal in here. And so if you look down here at the metering, the DI is hovering between -12, maybe a little lower. And that one's set a little bit lower because the RBI SansAmp does not have an individual volume knob for the DI out. So this is just whatever my bass is pushing through. But also, if so depending on how you play the bass could be very dynamic. So if I'm just doing fingerstyle, so it's not going to peak above -12, but the second I start slapping, now it's hitting at around just a little under -6. So having that dynamic range is totally fine, but it's also not so low that I'm going to be compromising the audio and adding a bunch of noise. Alright, so from here I'm going to go ahead and record my bass part. Alright, cool. So now that I have my bass part tracked, I have 7 takes, but the last 3 I thought were pretty good. So I'm just going to show real quick some more editing things that you can do. So let's just listen to this bass track real quick. Okay, so right away I noticed that this little part right here was ahead. Alright, so I'm going to switch down to take 6 for this part, because it seems a little more in time. Let's listen to that. So that first hit was, everything else was better, but this was late. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here, take a look at that. Just that one note. But then we lost the double stop on the finger. Go. So you can even get that detailed with the editing. You can just put in one note that's messed up. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you there. And then I already know that this could be better there. Alright, so here is my finished bass take. So now that I have all these moved around, and let's say I don't want to mess with this anymore, what I'm going to do is go ahead and flatten and merge these. Now, if you're not sure if you want to come back to this and re-edit it, you can always just duplicate this track with the audio with all the takes on it, and then hide it away. You can do that by just selecting these two tracks, right-clicking, hide track, and then there they are, they're gone. So you can duplicate them, move the audio down, hide the ones you don't want to see anymore. But what we're going to do is we're just going to commit to these takes. All right, so to do that, over here there's a little A. We're going to click on the A. And what we're going to do is we're going to click flatten and merge. So what that's going to do is all of the edits we make, it's going to select, or it's going to slice the audio into where those little edit points are, and then it's going to go back over it again and make it one track. Here we go, flatten and merge. Okay, and now we just have one audio file per track. And we're going to go ahead and do that with the guitar tracks as well. Okay, so now that we have our guitar and bass tracks in there, for a lot of you guys that should be enough. You'll be able to get a lot of ideas out that way. Alright, so once you have these tracks recorded in, there's a whole lot you can do with them. Maybe you play a part and you realize it's not the right tones, then you have to spend more time, doing it all over again, and you just want to hear an idea and quickly be able to get the idea back so you can make a decision on it or not. And so if you have to find a new tone, re-record the tone, you could have written another riff maybe, or you could have decided how you wanted this transition to go. But if you have these DI tracks, then you can just load up a tone that you think would work, and if it works, then great. If not, then you just move on. You want to make quick decisions, right? All right, so what I've done is I've gone ahead and I have turned the volume down on these guitar DIs because we don't want to hear them through the main left-right. And what I've done is I've made two sends to bus 10 and bus 11. And bus 10, I have placed a amp sim. It's the UAD Engel E646VS. This is a fairly expensive amp sim plugin on the Universal Audio UAD plugin platform. And then I have a second one over here with the Ignite Emissary and an IR loader. And these are free. So if you guys don't have an amp sim or an IR loader, you can go download these as a bundle for free on the STL Tones website. And in the IR loader, I just have the plugin pointing to a folder on my desktop that has some impulse responses in it. Okay, so to get this set up, what I've done is I just have these two tracks, these two DI tracks being sent on buses, and what I want to show you is you want to make sure that they are pre-fader, and you want to click on independent pan, and what that means is the track panning will follow into the auxiliary channel. So for instance, if independent pan was not checked, then these channels, or these two DI tracks, are going to be sent to this auxiliary straight down the middle. It will not apply these panning knobs that I've made to make it hard left and hard right. And the reason why we want the guitar DIs to come in hard left and hard right is because a lot of these amp sims, you can select a dual mono version of the amp sim. And so in one plugin, you can have your left guitar amp and your right guitar amp all at the same time, instead of having to drag a separate plugin for the left and then another instance of that plugin for the right. You can just have it on one place, and it's going to use less computer resources. So I'm going to show you what it sounds like Without independent pan, you're just going to hear the signal go straight down the middle. It's not going to have any stereo depth to it at all. But if we click this independent pan tab, and the little blue circle turns into a yellow circle, now this pan knob will follow into the track. So now you're going to hear the DIs pan hard left and hard right inside of this amp sim. We've done the same thing here on bus 11 going to the emissary. Let's listen to the emissary. So after we've had everything set up, let's go ahead and take a listen to everything. So this is the Engel. And here is the emissary. So the emissary is already sort of tuned for this aggressive modern metal sort of sound. So it's going to sound a lot brighter than a lot of other amps, but I think it cuts through a mix pretty good. And for being free, I think it's great. And there's a lot of different cabs you can pick from that come with it. So just know that that's there. But now let's say that there are certain tones that you know you're going to be working with over and over again, and that's kind of where these come in. So let's say like you own this Engel and you wanted to keep it there, then you can always just have that there in your template. And then if you want to try different tones, all you have to do is turn that on and you can hear what it sounds like. And again, if you were to record another take into here, as long as your DI settings are the same, you can audition that tone. Okay, so now that we've kind of have a tone that we think is cool, or we have a couple tones that we can play around with, let's try getting these other tracks in a place where we can get them to sound good without doing a whole lot to them, okay? So for the bass, what I'm going to recommend doing is if you have a limiter plugin, go ahead and use that. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut down on some of the dynamics. So I have a bunch of limiters here, but I'm going to use the limiter that comes stock in Logic. Okay, and what I'm doing with this limiter is I'm just making all of the hits around the same volume. And so you can play around with the settings to do that, but that's the idea of what this limiter is doing. Okay, now if anyone out there is a Waves user, what I'm going to recommend on your bass tracks, especially ones that you've comped and edited, just as a fail-safe, you can put on this X Crackle plugin, and all of the pops and clicks from any bad edits you might have done, you can get rid of with the normal crackle reduction preset. Let me turn this off real quick. If you listen to the very first part of this, you'll hear a really nasty pop before one of the notes. Right there, on this note right here in bar 2. Alright, that's from a bad edit. So we're going to put X Crackle on, and it's going to just suck that right out. So it's a lot better than what it was, and hopefully with everything going on, it won't be so noticeable. And so let's listen to the track now with the limiter on, and you can hear what I mean by how we want to get all of these hits to be the same volume. Alright, so that sounds a lot more even and consistent. It's also sort of helping the EQ a little bit. So without the limiter, you just hear a lot of the clank. With the limiter, you start to get the low end back, and everything's a little more put together. Now I'm noticing this guitar is a little muddy, so I'm going to go ahead and just put a stock EQ on it. This kind of 390 area, a lot of guitars can build up there, so I'm just going to take a little bit of that out. Alright, that sounds pretty good. So once we got all that done, let's talk about the drums. What you want to do is you want to go in here and you just want to make sure all of your drums are balanced. Okay, cool. So I just listened to each component of the kit. It's all pretty balanced, so now I can hear everything. And then another thing you can do really quick, if you have a Waves C6, there's a full drum set preset that sounds pretty decent for things like this. So just click that on. Alright, so we set up a drum reverb on another auxiliary channel. Okay, and another thing you can do for your drum rooms is you can get another limiter going here and just totally slam the crap out of it. And then everything going into the reverb will be super consistent and squashed. With the drums. So now you have a little bit of realism with the reverb. Alright, and there you have it. So now, what we can do is, let's say we like all this stuff, let's get rid of the stuff we don't like. So we're not going to use this emissary tone. We like the angle tone. You know, we have our bass and our bass DI. Now the bass, we're using the SansAmp, but let's say that you didn't own a SansAmp and you wanted to make your own bass tone. Logic has their own bass amp designer. So you can just put this directly on the DI track. And let's listen to this real quick. So you can blend between the amp and the direct box. You can put different mics on the speaker. When you're working with speakers, typically towards the center of the speaker is going to be brighter, and towards the cone is going to be darker. And then as you back it away, you'll get less air. So there's cool. I'm going to turn this compressor on. Alright, then I'm going to throw the same limiter on from the first track. Alright, so we got a pretty decent bass sound fairly quickly. Let's mute this other bass track and listen to this in the mix. Alright, so the EQ is a little weird on it. It's really honky. So I'm going to turn down the mids quite a bit. Another thing you can do is you can change the mic on the cabinet. You can adjust the blend, but changing the cabinet is going to give it the biggest change in tone. So we're going to change to a 10-inch speaker. This should be a little bit tighter. Yeah, so that's pretty good. The bass is cool, it's sitting there, but it doesn't have that sub that we're looking for. So let's see, I think in Logic, yes. So in Logic we have this thing called sub bass, and it just creates low-end harmonics. There's a preset called Below the Kick, and that's just going to add super low harmonics to the bass. Bass booster probably will be a little bit more appropriate. And we're going to put this before the limiter so the limiter can catch the low end. And then we're going to go back to the guitars and we're going to make this little EQ cut, just a little shelf at around 70 hertz, just so the bass can stay out of the way of the guitars and vice versa. So show you what it's like with and without this EQ and with and without the bass boost. So let me show you with the guitar EQ. You're going to hear the bass, the low end of the bass and the kick drum just kind of come right out, and all that murkiness is going to go away. See how I just cleaned it right up? And then here's what the bass booster preset on this is doing. I'm going to kick that on and off, and you're going to hear the low end just totally disappear when this thing turns off. Okay, and then the last thing we'll do on this bass is we're going to put an EQ. There's still like a really honky frequency that I'm hearing. So around 200 hertz, there was this little node that just kept popping out at me. So I'm going to play it again, and you're going to hear it turn off. I'm going to turn it on and off for you. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to do, this may seem counterintuitive, but I'm just going to put a teeny little shelf all the way at the bottom here, 20 hertz. And this is just going to clean things up that much more. And I'll show you what that sounds like. Most of our sub information that we want is going to be between maybe 80 and maybe 30, sort of sitting around 50. So all of this last octave of information, we just want to be very careful about what we put there, okay? And that will do it for the bass. So I think this is sounding pretty good. From here, I would adjust the volumes until I thought they sat pretty nicely. But what I'm going to do from here is we're going to save this as a template. Okay, and once we save it as a template, we can load it up and recall it, and everything's going to be there. And all we have to do is record into these tracks, and everything is going to sound the way it should. All right, so the first thing to do is we're going to go ahead and delete all of this. Now, if you're working in a project that you have gotten pretty far on, I would just make a duplicate, like save as. All right, then you want to go in here and you want to delete all the audio and the MIDI because we don't want to save that into our template. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into our audio bin, and these are all the audio files that are in this project. We're going to Command A, select all of them, and we're going to delete them all because we do not want to save any of these audio files and have them carry over into every template we do. That's just going to be a little too much. You're going to have so many more files on your computer that you don't need. So some of you might be asking, what am I going to do with all these tones in my template if I'm only going to use one at a time? Well, what's cool about Logic and most other DAWs is that you can save entire channel strip settings. So, for instance, this bass tone that we just got, everything is gain staged, so if you keep recording all of your bass DIs the exact same way and hitting the same way, you can say save channel strip settings as. We can name this, we can call this template bass DI. We can call it anything you want, and then you can save it, and then the next project you're in, let's say you're working in a different session, you're making a new thing, or you're in a different template, and you want to get this tone back, it'll always be there. And it'll always sound exactly the same, and you know what it's going to do because all your DIs are recorded the same way. You can do the same thing with your guitar track. So this Ingle track that we made, we can save this as a channel strip setting, and all the EQs that we made to get out the muddiness, those will be saved with it as well. Or as well as all the different adjustments we made to the left side and the right side and the cabinets and all that stuff. It's all there. And so that's kind of the next level of what I'm getting at too, is that once you make something that you like and you have a workflow that's extremely consistent, you can start bringing in other sounds from other projects that you've done. So the more you do this, you start building a bank of sounds. So that's where I'm going with all this. So if it seemed confusing that I was jumping around and making a bunch of tones, because you have a reference for all the levels and how all the tracks should work together. That's the end goal with something like this, is to, as you keep working, everything you've ever done will become available to you and usable to you. And so from here, you can go to File, and then you can go Save as Template. And if you do Save as Template in Logic, it will already populate to a Project Templates folder. If you do not have a DAW that automatically makes a Project Templates folder, you can make your own, and then you can just save as into that folder, and you can just title it Writing Template Hard Rock, Writing Template Metal, right? And you can adjust this template with different tones and different virtual instruments that you need for the kind of project you're making. So we're just going to call this rock songwriting. And so now I know every time I pull up the rock songwriting template, I'm going to have a left and right guitar, a decent sounding drum machine, and everything I need for my bass guitar, as well as an alternative tone already ready to go that I know is going to work. And it's all set up, and I can just worry about recording riffs. And so I hope you guys learned a lot from this. This has been building templates for songwriting. And again, you can tailor this to any genre, but this is the process of how I would go about making a songwriting workflow in Logic. All right, be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. This is a new YouTube channel, and if there's anything else you want to know, or if there's anything else I can help you with, or if you have more ideas for the kind of content you want to see, just leave some comments, and I'll be making more videos in the near future. All right, thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.